present day, far away from the historic buildings and core of the property. Another alternative would have eliminated a third of the parking lot to allow the recreation of more of the gardens. All the alternatives called for upgrading the mechanical systems and installing a fire suppression system in the house. Superintendent Gay Vietzig said many visitors were disappointed by the existing site layout. There are a lot of folks who wish we had some place where you would go to be oriented to the entire place and make it easier to plan your visit, rather than just coming up the hill and into a big parking lot and then having the experience split between the visitor center and the house with Old Orchard in the opposite direction, she said. But Norman Parsons, president of the Theodore Roosevelt Association, essentially killed the proposal single-handedly with his opposition. The reason that people go to Sagamore Hill is the house, he said, and the existing parking was closer to it than the new lot would be. He objected to a new building on the property, anticipated neighbors would fight any new construction or increased activity near their homes. The current president of the TR board, Tweed Roosevelt of Boston, a great-grandson of the colonel, and a grandson of Archie, believes the organization made a mistake in opposing the staff's preferred recommendation in 2005. I would like to see the Park Service revisit the idea of relocating the parking lot to the edge of the property. I think that's a good idea, too. The less ambitious management plan that was adopted did not recommend expansion of Old Orchard. It did recommend transforming the new bar into a visitor center to replace the existing small information center gift shop. With removal of the parking lot rejected, the Park Service began undertaking small projects to bring the house and grounds closer to their historic appearance. For almost a century, the surface under the portiche had been asphalt. As part of a $775,000 initiative to make the property more historically accurate, the bricks that TR had decided should be laid out in a herringbone pattern under the shelter for visitors arriving by carriage were unearthed in 2008. The staff was not even sure the bricks remained under the asphalt put down about 1910 when a macadam driveway was installed. But earlier repairs to the portiche indicated the bricks might be there, and removing the asphalt carefully by hand revealed them. Some bricks that had crumbled because of the heavy traffic were replaced. A project began in 2010 and 2011 stemmed from the management's plan goals of restoring 6.2 acres of former farm fields, orchards, and lawns. The Park Service replanted a portion of the original fruit orchard east of the parking lot. 46 Baldwin, Roxbury russets, and white sap apple trees and Seckel pear trees were planted among 20 surviving fruit trees to re-establish the historic grid pattern of the orchard. In other work to restore more of the property, about 600 feet of split rail fence was installed along with a replica of the arbor that had been located at the pet cemetery. And 2 acres of the new growth trees and shrubs on part of the west lawn and 2 from fields southeast of the house and south of the parking lot were removed. NPS has been cutting down trees that had grown up since the early 1900s on the west lawn adjacent to the house a decade earlier and restored 4 historic farm buildings. The replica windmill, constructed in the early 1970s, was rehabilitated at a cost of almost $200,000. A small section of the cutting garden was recreated in 2012. About 500 square feet of some of the same flowers that were lost to the paving of the access road and parking lot, as well as lack of maintenance, were planted around a new welcome sign installed in a circle of grass at the entrance to the parking area. The miniature garden featured a mix of annuals, perennials, and shrubs, including carnations, petunias, marigolds, zinnias, snapdragons, larkspur, chrysanthemum, clematis, and moonbeam flower, with annuals for color. While all of this work was taking place on the grounds, the staff was gearing up for the biggest project at the house since its construction. It would turn out to be a $10 million rehabilitation from foundation to roof that required closing the building for 3 years. Theodore Roosevelt might have had limitless energy, but by the beginning of the 21st century, his residence was tired. The rejuvenation project included rewiring and relighting the entire house, upgrading the heating and ventilation, security, fire, defection, and suppression systems, putting on a new roof, and rehabilitating the entire exterior, including all the windows and adding new storm windows. The biggest change for visitors would be improved indirect lighting in the iconic trophy-filled North Room. In the past, a dim illumination made it impossible to see the far wall or much of the detail from the barrier at the entrance. Attentive repeat visitors might also notice that the addition built on the back porch in the 1950s would be removed, and the central light and air shaft from the second floor to the roof removed at the same time would be recreated. The project would also make the first floor permanently handicapped accessible, replacing temporary ramps from the 1980s. The project required extensive planning and preparation. Sagamore Hill Museum specialist Susan Sarna supervised the process of removing 800,000 books and 8,000 books. Still, that's a lot. And 6,000 other artifacts ranging from an elephant foot waste paper basket to a grizzly bear rug to make way for the construction crews. The first step was to update the 1964 house inventory, including built-in items such as mantels and even wallpaper. A spreadsheet was created for each room, listing every object with its history, photograph, details on where it had been displayed, and a description of its materials. Next was devising a plan for removing what could be removed and protecting the rest in place. We have a master plan for every single object in the house, where it's going, when and how it's going to be packed, and who is going to pack it, and where it's going to be stored, Sarna said at the start of the project. There was a $100,000 budget just for packing and moving, and $150,000 for off-site storage of artifacts that would not fit into the Old Orchard Museum. 3 NPS conservators who specialize in furniture, taxidermy, and paintings made suggestions on packing and transportation, and they also helped determine which items needed immediate repairs to withstand the strain of being moved. About a dozen damaged frames were repaired. After undergoing specialized training, Sarna instructed the other staff members and experienced volunteers on packing items. These objects that could not be removed safely became the responsibility of Jeff Finch, an MPS regional historic building specialist who has developed a niche expertise of installing protective walls and flooring in historic buildings undergoing restoration. Over more than 10 weeks, he designed and installed a system of false walls and other gatherings to protect all the built-in features. Besides covering walls, staircases, and bookcases, Finch protected an armoire in the third floor linen closet, the only piece of furniture to remain in the house because it was large and did not come apart. Finch also mounted animal heads considered too fragile to disturb. He never uses any nails or puts holes in anything, Sarna marveled. Finch's ingredients are plywood, furring strips, sheets of thin plastic foam, cardboard tubes, plastic shearing, and special plastic flooring. It's all done with friction and gravity, he explained, with an occasional assist from blue painter's tap. After Finch had installed this cushioning, the contractors moved in, including those trying to wrestle with the perennial problem of heating and cooling the house. Climate control had always been an issue for the Park Service, just as it was for TRA and the Roosevelts. When the massive rehabilitation was being planned, the possibility of adding air conditioning to resolve chronic problems with high humidity and heat was discussed and then rejected. Sarna, other MPS staff, the consultants and contractors came to understand the house had been designed by Lamb & Rich with an effective ventilation system. The light and air shaft running from the second floor to the roof had been removed during the 1950s renovations. We realized that the architects knew what they were doing, and the air was meant to circulate through the house through this air shaft, and taking it out and putting in a fan wasn't working, said Sarna, now Sagamore Hill's museum curator. It was decided to recreate the shaft, solving the ventilation problem while making the house more historically accurate. The air shaft was augmented by 2 new ventilation systems to improve circulation and remove humidity without air conditioning. Another visible change was the return of the rear service porch, and also removed in the 1950s. The addition that enclosed the porch with its brick arch to create a staff break room is now gone. The rehabilitation project was partially funded by the non-profit Friends of Sagamore Hill, yielded some interesting artifacts. Carpenter Richard Vischoff was working on a second-floor bedroom when he found 2 business cards inside a window sash. On a whim, he called the number printed on them and connected it with carpenter John Bruckner, who helped overhaul the house nearly 4 decades earlier. Bruckner, then 84, returned to visit, and his business cards became part of an exhibit about the restoration of the Old Orchard Museum, along with antique tools, horseshoes, and a calendar from 1918, all found inside the walls. When the contractors were finished, MPS and private conservation experts moved in. Wallpaper in the north room dating to 1905 that had been damaged by leaks and removed for restoration by the non-profit Northeast Document Conservation Center in Massachusetts was rehung using a protective methyl cellulose adhesive solution. Staffers at the center spent weeks removing the surface dirt and adding special long fiber Japanese paper to its backside to reinforce it. Other wallpaper was touched up on site with the same solution to stabilize it. The conservators spent almost a week using a removable paint to recreate details worn away by early visitors. Other workers installed ultraviolet protective film over the glass of repaired windows to protect the interior of the house from sun damage and make it easier for visitors to see inside the rooms. More than 2,000 visitors lined up on July 12, 2015 to see the Theodore Roosevelt home when it reopened. Among those in attendance were 5 members of the Roosevelt family. They did a tremendous job, TR's great-grandson Tweed Roosevelt told the crowd. It's pristine, but not so much that it doesn't look lived in. Theodore Roosevelt V, another of TR's great-grandsons, added, "It is clearly in better condition than it was when the old line was here." As for the future, the Park Service plans to continue the effort outlined in the General Management Plan to bring Sagamore Hill closer to its historical appearance. That would include removing the visitor center gift shop to restore the historic chicken yard that was on the spot and create a new visitor center in the new barn if funding comes available. But for now, the Theodore Roosevelt home is in